Imagine a world where more women have the time to fully explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the UK's podcast for women leaders and founders ready to unlearn conventional rules and lead their businesses of significance. Hailed for counter-status quo ideas and a whole dose of feminine perspective, this is our International Women's Day series, sponsored by our headline partners, NatWest. My name's Lulu Minns. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast. Welcome to episode 110 of She Rebel Radio, Embrace Community with Sarah Vachon. Sarah is the founder of Citizens of Soil, who create award-winning extra virgin olive oils that elevate both the table and the farmer. Turning the commodity of oil into community, Sarah initially started the business as a side hustle, where she works to champion small batch female farmers across the Mediterranean, giving them more pounds to produce not only an award-winning olive oil, but they can reinvest in their own land with regenerative agricultural practices. With a focus on soil health, biodiversity and going beyond the monocrop, Citizens of Oil have featured in The Times, The Guardian and Sheerluxe online style magazine. As guess what, ladies? We can use this oil in our martinis and when making a chocolate cake. Sarah was nominated for the 100 Female Entrepreneurs to Watch list with NatWest and The Telegraph. It's amazing to have you here, Sarah. How are you doing?
Yeah, fine. Really excited to talk to your audience.
Yeah, I know that everything that you're doing is right up our street at She Rebel Radio. So I'm really looking forward to diving in. Now, Citizens of Oil was born in 2020. I believe you were on holiday in Greece. How did you birth a new sustainable business in a year which really blew life away as we knew it?
Yeah, the business actually started, I guess, in plan quite a long time ago, although we did people do tend to refer to it as a lockdown project just because we went live on our website, actually selling our first oil on like the 29th of December of 2020. So launching a business, really spending that whole year of 2020. At the end of 2019, we had already committed to the oil with the farmers. We were bringing it over. Then the world shut down, that March. But because that's the only way I've ever built a business, I think it did seem a bit crazy. And I often think, gosh, how amazing would it have been to start a business when it's not a financial crisis and a pandemic and supply chain issues? How easy must that be? Of course, I think there's always struggles with starting it. And to be honest, we didn't know any differently. So I carried on that way. But almost now is a more difficult time because we're starting to see more of the repercussions of what that pandemic meant. Supply chains are actually more complicated. It's more difficult for us to get basic things like boxes and glass and things. So we're finding this new chapter, having even more adventures than in the midst of the pandemic, which is quite interesting. I think then everyone was kind of just open to this like pivot and rolling up their sleeves and trying to do whatever they could to get it done. And now we're setting into this new normal. And so, yeah, I think every day as an entrepreneur has a new adventure.
Yeah. And it's kind of taken its toll in some respects on us all, isn't it? In terms of, there's such an unpredictability of so many kind of factors that we're constantly having to pivot and change the way that we do things, no matter what your business is. The market's not predictable. As you said, supply chains are not predictable. So we're constantly having to adapt and change to a world that is changing and evolving for the better or the worse.
Definitely. And I think what started off as this idea of just trying to get our farmers a more fair share for their oil and thinking, oh, well, we'll just sell this oil at our local farmers market. And this will be, something we do on Saturdays. Because of the pandemic, we actually had a lot of time to kind of think about it. We were at home all the time, kind of scheming. Because I had a sustainability background, I knew that was always going to be a core something throughout that underpinned the whole business. However, things like subscriptions really took off during the pandemic, and it wasn't something we were planning at the beginning. And the fact that our business really, for a while, and still has a very strong D2C side, people are buying subscriptions straight through our website. The refill element that we have, you can buy our bottles, but you can buy refill pouches. And I think those were things that a couple of years ago, even when we were starting to think of the plan, wouldn't have been there, but existed because of all the trends that kind of came out of lockdown.
Yeah, and kind of food became I think people cooking more at home and spending more time at home as well, something that we kind of value more instead of rushing around so much. So it sounds like benefits of lockdown and then also huge difficulties as well. Now, you've mentioned farmers getting their fair share. I'd love to talk about how Citizens of Soil elevates the farmer. How has olive oil become a commodity and a broken system? Tell us about what's been happening.
Yeah, so olive oil is traded like a commodity, and it's treated that way. So which means that there is a price that is set in the market every year and throughout. I kind of watch these commodity prices as they unfold throughout the whole harvest season. And so farmers are forced to accept these prices, and they have really little space to negotiate on quality or, of course, there's different parameters for sometimes what we call an earlier harvest or organic, but particularly smaller farmers, this is not the journey. So most small batch producers across the Mediterranean, so these farmers are selling to their local mills and they're forced to accept that price.
Yeah.
Which means that it's never really great. It's certainly not fair. And it means that a lot of producers are squeezed, and so they're having to cut corners, and that means that the environment is suffering, the quality of that oil is suffering. I mean, there are things like producers will hold back this fresh olive oil, and I think it's important to note that extra virgin olive oil is a fresh fruit juice. The moment it is produced without heat and chemicals, it is at its peak, and over the course of a year or two it starts to degrade, which is why you should be using oil within those 24 months of harvest. But what happens is producers will often wait until the price suits them a bit better because there's going up and down in the market. Okay. And they are selling on old oils. They are actually heating up the oil a bit in the production, which you're not supposed to do, but they can kind of get away with it. They are, not doing a proper way of milling, which means you're harvesting and immediately getting it to the mill. Sometimes they'll have those olives sitting out there for days or weeks, in fact, which means the fruit itself starts to just sometimes even get like moldy and break down. And so then that's going to the mill. So there's a lot of ways that people do that, including the most dangerous for us on a wider perspective, which is destroying the land to get more yield. Everything is about yield over quality because you're not getting rewarded for that quality. Your name isn't even on the bottle. No one knows that it is coming from you. You are selling it to a mill. It's getting blended by the mill with loads of other small producers just like you. It's being sold on in these big bulk batches that are completely anonymous. And often what ends up with our tiny Greek farmer, in rural Crete, their oil is ultimately ending up on a shelf in the UK 2 years later with a label that looks like it's an Italian peasant farmer. And it is not representative at all of where it's come from. And so I think, but that doesn't mean these farmers don't have a lot of care for what they're creating. And often they're making some beautiful oil that they're consuming for just themselves or in their local community, which was the case with our first farmers that we started to work with. They were making this beautiful product. And because they're small batch farmers, actually all the oil that they were making was quite a high quality because they cared about their land.
Yeah.
They were making something that they wanted to consume and share, around their area and with the wider family. We were taking back, big, for years, we've been such good family friends. We were taking back big containers of oil to London with us to get us through the year. And this oil, they were making decisions that improved that quality, harvesting earlier, making sure the olives were in a great condition, not wanting to spray and use all these chemicals because, again, this was going to them and their children. So what you see is kind of this contrast in really great oils and really, really poor quality oils. And really, whenever you're prioritizing yield over flavor and nutrition and the environment, what ends up getting on the table is lacking all the nutrition and flavor and everything we're told extra virgin olive oil is supposed to be. And what we're finding in the supermarkets is often not representative of extra virgin olive oil at all.
But it's cheaper to buy is the sound of it.
It's cheaper to buy. Yes, 100%.
And how did you discover this? You were on holiday in Greece, or you go on holiday in Greece or Crete very frequently?
Yeah, so my husband actually met this woman on a boat between Santorini and Crete like 17 years ago. She was an English teacher. They started chatting. They became really good friends. She showed him around Crete when he arrived. And really just a great friendship developed. And so much so that she came over to London, he went to Crete, and 12 years ago or so, I started doing the same thing, and we became a part of this Greek family. And they are small batch producers. The family does wine. They do a local spirit called raki. They're making honey, fruits. I mean, it's really a very kind of biodiversity focused estates. Everyone in the family kind of does something different. Someone's a shepherd. So we have all these beautiful small batch artisan foods.
When it happens so much to food, doesn't it? I remember going to Croatia a few years ago on a yoga retreat, and I can be a bit, when I'm in the UK, funny about eating tomatoes. I do eat them, but when I was there, I couldn't stop. I was like, oh my God, these are the most amazing things I've eaten. And just, as you say, when things are passed down and become a commodity, it loses the taste, the flavor, and actually all of the nutrients as well, but is sold cheaply to us in the supermarkets.
Oh, 100%. I mean, anyone, if you go to Greece in the summer, have their cucumbers, which they will often serve you with just salt and maybe olive oil. And you're like, what is this cucumber? Why isn't it super watery? Why does it have flavor? This is incredible. Yeah, those sorts of things absolutely blow your mind and kind of change your expectation of food once you get home. I'm the same. I very rarely eat tomatoes. It has to be a great peak time of year that have come over from like the Isle of Wight or something to even.
Yeah, and cucumber. I barely eat that. I don't really touch it when I'm in the UK. So I don't think I've had a really good one. So I need to try that. Now, you mentioned your family friend. And I know you're part of your business, as when we kind of opened this episode up, is supporting small batch female farmers. And you make two really powerful statements about women, female farmers, firstly stating that they are pillars of their land and culture, preserving their ancient land and soil. And secondly, that they are sitting on the front lines of erosion and desertification of land. And can you tell us more about those two statements and the connection of women and land and what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, so in general, farmers across the Mediterranean are on the front lines of the climate crisis. They are, because these are huge agricultural belts. I mean, it's not just beautiful olive oil that comes from there. There's so much of our produce that you see on shelves in the UK and Northern Europe are coming from this region. And the way that the industrial agriculture has been going now for decades has really taught those farmers to produce things for yield and destroy the land. In order, they're tilling it up. They are using chemicals. They're doing all sorts of things that are damaging those ecosystems. And so I was actually just recently talking to a farmer in Crete who is the only one in her area that is doing this regenerative farming. And she was saying, like, and I've heard it from a couple of farmers now, like, Africa and the desert is moving up to us. Like, there is so much erosion. You can go through these whole patches that they say they can't even grow. These farmers can't even grow on their land anymore because the land has been stripped of all life. And it's one reason in particular. So olive trees don't need a lot to actually grow. They're extremely hardy. They grow in deserts. I find them sometimes in the Mediterranean growing in tiny little plots of parking lots, and you see them in London as ornamental trees, and you actually just don't need to give them very much fertilizer or nutrition just to live. Of course, they don't thrive that way. But it's one of the reasons I'm quite wary of organic certifications in olive oil, because whenever I see these farms and I go to these regions that are producing olive oil, but particularly around organic, they are really destroying all life except for the trees. So you won't even see a blade of grass. They are completely tilling up the land. They're all about, there's this principle in olive oil production about tilling that land and really putting, because olive trees like it to be a bit dry, getting air into the roots, so the land on top, that topsoil is just dead because they're trying to get air down to the roots of the olive tree. So whenever you see these in groves, of course, no bugs are growing because no life is growing. Not even a blade of grass is there. So
I don't know if you read. There's a book called Blading Sweetgrass, which is about the ancient Native American, connections to land, and how that so many plants were grown together because of the understanding of how plants actually support each other. And again, as you've said, in terms of turning plants and things into a commodity, what we seem to do is separate things out and not realize that all plants kind of, well, not all plants, but they belong together and nourish and support and sustain each other. Is that part of regenerating land, is doing that, and with animals, I think, as well?
Exactly. So there is a whole thing about incorporating grazing animals, which, in the Mediterranean, it's often these sheep and goats that are used to put fertilizer in. But also, yeah, building back that biodiversity is really important. And so that's what we're looking for with our farmers. I was just in Greece this summer in Crete with one of our farmers who was showing me all these new citrus trees and other things than olive trees that they had planted and bay trees. And they were so excited to show that they had planted these all around, which benefits them because they quite enjoy the fruit of pomegranate trees and things that are on the land. But it is a much richer way to you find birds nest in the trees, which is also something you have to be mindful of harvesting. There's bees everywhere. There is life. You can set down your camera and record a video and you just hear all this sound coming from these groves. And that's what's really important to us whenever we're working with farmers, ones that are utilizing their land really to the fullest way, because these traditional groves are spaced out. There is, a lot of farmable land, I suppose, to grow beans, which are a great soil cover, to grow wild herbs, which, are also great for that biodiversity. So yeah, that's something that we're looking for. And to the female point, there is quite a shortage of female farmers in Europe in general. I mean, there's different rates everywhere from, under 30, under 20%, in some countries are farms that are managed by women. And particularly in these really rural Mediterranean communities, and something like olive oil, just like, actually we've seen in wine and coffee and other things, women in these industries are a minority. Whenever I go to the olive mills during the season, I am often the only woman. Well, I am the only woman there that is not the one serving coffee. There are, even during harvest, it's quite male dominated unless you're doing it like a traditional family harvest. I go on these sourcing trips and I drop down in a region, like I was in the Istrian Peninsula in Croatia, which has incredible oils and, just known for the quality. And I'm going around and I'm asking all these even well-known olive oil producers, who are the women making this in this space? Do you know any female farmers? And they just can't name any. It is really hard to find female farmers in olive oil. But one thing that I found interesting, so whenever I set out to, my first farmer just so happened to be a grove that was owned by our friend Maria. Whenever I started thinking, you know what? One of the ways that I started to learn about olive oil was through a networking group called Women in Olive Oil, which is just about that. It's about empowering women across the space. And so we have women from all over the Middle East, from Latin America, everywhere that we grow olive trees. And they're really sometimes the only person in their community. So they're desperate to use this networking group to kind of meet others like them and ask the questions that they don't want to have to ask the male community. They're trying to learn that way. So whenever I started to set the bar for, okay, I think I want to work with female farmers, and I want them to be regenerative, and I want it to have a really high standard of olive oil. And everyone was like, you're just not going to find any. Like, you're going to have like 2 farmers. There's no way you're going to find these women.
There aren't any.
There really aren't. And I started, as I was touching down, I did a sourcing trip around Portugal, the one in Croatia and Greece. And I'm like, oh my God, there has to be, like, there are women that own this land, because this land is ancestral land that's handed down. So women, like men and women, are born, the same rate. So there are women that own these family lands. So what's happening to that land and who's running it? Whenever I did finally find women in the space, all I really had to do was find the woman, and the quality was there, and the progressive, regenerative, sustainable farming was there. And that's really because what I started to see was this trend of almost, with the men, they were learning this from their fathers, and they were doing just as their fathers had been doing. When women came in the field, there was a lack of confidence that actually became a bit of like their superpower, because it made them want to learn above and beyond what they needed to, which you see in loads of industries. See, I just heard a report recently on female pilots and like how they are so outskilling the male pilots in the field, because they've gone to do so much extra training. They are so much more qualified. And that's what I have found. And my husband always jokes about it. He's like, if you just find a female producer, she's going to tick, every box here, really, because
that's that proving ourselves in these male dominated industries that infiltrate exactly so many things.
Yeah, it's exactly that. So once we find them, they are often doing multiple courses. They're finding every educational opportunity. They're doing like hundreds of hours sometimes of training to really refine their craft, and also through that, because now the EU is teaching more about these sustainable practices and encouraging these people on more sustainable, which a couple of decades ago they were telling them the opposite. So now we have these women who are learning, I guess, the more increasingly modern and progressive ways to farm, and so they're already ticking that regenerative box, which is great.
Yeah. And I love, I know I shared with you when we were setting up for this interview, it's our most downloaded episode is by Dr. Sharon Blackie, who talks about our connection with land as women. That is, the ancient way of things, is that we would connect and protect the land because we understand it. Our cycles are the same as the land. And, would say when that's enough farming or and I think as women, I call it a feminine-based principle, really understand the interconnectedness of things, and don't necessarily need to separate out so much in that kind of single-minded focus of let's just have olive trees and nothing else. So, we talk about feminine-based principles a lot on She Rebel, and I think this really ties into that, and things that women have to contribute.
That's such a nice point to bring up, because you're exactly right. The divine feminine connection to agriculture should not be overlooked, and especially in something like olive oil. Often whenever I do tasting events, and one of the slides I show is how people used to produce olive oil and how they produce it now, and the modern and ancient techniques. And women have always been a part of the olive oil harvest. Historically, there are certain roles that actually sometimes still exist in certain communities, with what role they played during the harvest. But historically, and going back to antiquity, women were a key part of the olive oil harvest. And there's something, I did a tour through these UNESCO groves in Mallorca, and they were talking about, because yes, women's cycles and their connection to, we follow the moon cycle, there's this whole connection to the land. And so they were saying that they were the ones that had to receive the fruit of the olive tree, of the olives from the tree, because they could ask of the tree because they also bear fruit. And so it was this lovely connection with the role that they had to set off the harvest. But yeah, women have always been involved with this, but it's recently and increasingly become more male, and their role, I suppose, in the management side of their land is one that I'm trying to help get them back to.
Yeah, and there's it runs alongside of the ownership of land, kind of coincided with the ownership of women. And I think there's something around also planting and fertility of the land, etc., around the full moon and the new moon as well, when's a good time to plant and things like that. I know there's some comeback with those kind of practices as well, which is great to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
So you had a strong vision of turning the commodity of soil into community. How have you unfurled that vision, and how has your background, you've mentioned your background in sustainability, supported you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, so both my partner and I have a solid background actually in brand building in general. I'm a marketer by trade, but my last post for the past few years in London was at an incredible sustainability company called provenance.org, which uses blockchain and all sorts of incredible tech to really make supply chains transparent and prove the social and environmental impact for brands. And so I certainly know that we did quite a few projects on in the sustainability space, looking at the full supply chain and realizing the need to highlight the people at the very beginning, what we call often the first mile. And in my case, in olive oil, this first mile, it's the farmers. These are the people creating it. And so as a consumer, I also know that those stories and the connection to the people behind the things that I buy, well, one, they make me feel better about my choices, but they also make you appreciate that product more. So I think this whole idea of kind of turning a commodity into a community and really elevating the farmer is about highlighting those people and telling their stories and bringing really my brand and marketing, putting my brand and marketing hat on and combining that with, the elements that I know about sustainability to tell those stories and why they're important. So I think one thing, whenever I first kind of looked at making the product, I knew that I wanted the farmer's name on the bottle. And that's something that's really important to these farmers because, like I said at the beginning, the way supply chains work in olive oil, these things are sold on and anonymized and sold in bulk, and their name is often never on a bottle. And one of the quotes that I remember our farmers, when I had actually put her on a call with a journalist, and he was asking, what does this mean to you? And she said, it feels like something that we've worked so hard on our whole lives and for generations is finally being appreciated. Like the fact that our name is on a bottle at Selfridges it just blows their mind. And so I think
instead of just being totally wiped out and made to be insignificant with land, as you said, that have belonged to families for generations.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, using the brand bit, using the sustainability background to get people excited about olive oil, but also excited about its journey and the people behind it, that where we want our oils to represent the people and places that they come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And really bringing back one of the episodes before this one, we're talking about embracing the sacred and remembering the sacredness of food and, all the love and effort and, things that are put into it for it to arrive on our table. And as citizens of soil elevates the table as well. Can you tell us more about the taste and the style? Why was that important too?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm a marketer. Brands are important to me. I think they're powerful. And the whole aesthetic and experience of it just really had to happen just because of my particular background, but also as a shopper. I knew the brand had to be sustainable from the start. Like at every point, my poor business partner was just like, why are you making things so much more expensive and so much more complicated, wanting to do the packaging this way, this label, even down to like our bottles, the seal on our bottles, because we have to have a tamper-proof seal, is a plant-based plastic. Like nobody knows, nobody cares. It's such a small element, but like every decision had to be like that. However, saying that, I didn't want to create like a really traditional eco kind of brand. I didn't want it to look like, you'd see it on the shelf and it has a look as if it's an eco kind of rustic farm to table brand, even though that's what is actually happening. I wanted it to be something that you would actually just purchase, again, at Selfridges, at a beautiful wine shop. You would see it show up on your Instagram and you'd be like, oh, I want that bottle. I want to have that because it looks exciting. It looks beautiful. It's something I'd be proud to display in my kitchen, which a lot of our customers do. So for me, that bit had to come first, that elevation of literally how it looks on your table. Like it suddenly, people gift our bottles all the time. And even our refill pouches, like we've had people say, this is just olive oil in a bag, in a pouch, and yet it looks so beautiful. It's something you'd be happy to kind of gift or share.
Well, and the bottle's refillable, isn't it? So the idea is that you keep it because you love it and you like it, and you refill it rather than throw it away.
Exactly. And that's the journey. Like the first thing is we want people, selfishly or for our own status, we like to see beautiful things in our home. And so that's where it kind of started. But then underpinned under all of this is the fact that it has, a great story, a lot of transparency. It has like a strong ethos behind it, which sometimes whenever you see on your Instagram, beautiful products, beautiful, be it fashion or beauty, I often call these Instagram brands because they have no actual depth to them. They're just beautiful packaging. So I wanted to kind of hook people with that beautiful packaging, but then actually have the substance underneath it. That's kind of how we wanted to really elevate the table, and by doing that, elevate the brand and the people behind it.
Yeah, amazing. And, a big congratulations to you for being nominated for the top 100 females entrepreneurs to watch. What additional support are you looking forward to receiving in the business and moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean, that honor was really exciting. We got to go to Parliament and we got to meet, I just enjoyed chatting with a lot of other incredible, inspiring women, not just in food and drink space or even consumer goods. There was women in tech and finance. And so I think things like that are important to kind of shed light on female entrepreneurs. I would say particularly there's still like financial support needed. The top 100 is simply that. It's just a recognition, but there's not funding or financial support that goes necessarily with that. So that is something that we have gone out and done as we've grown the business. So last year, in the summertime, we actually did a fundraise because we kept selling out of oil and we kept running out of oil, and the orders that were coming in, we would have to buy so much more than we did the previous year because we work to a harvest schedule. Harvest in the olive oil space is in the autumn, which means that, by January, I'm buying all the oil for the next year, and you kind of really have to plan. And so we have luckily been growing so much and had incredible new stockists and new opportunities come up. That means we keep having to buy more and more oil, which is really key for us because it means that we get to work with more farmers. We do a lot of these beautiful single estate oils and they're small batch. So, we have completely taken all the oil except for what's being used for the family from our farmer in Crete. We've now moved on to another farmer in Greece and in Portugal. So we are expanding. We have one in Croatia coming up. We're, Sicily, we have this range of farmers. So growing the business means we get to work with more farmers, which is actually like the most exciting part. Every time someone buys a bottle of our oil, it's giving us the opportunity to expand into more of these farmers and commit to them more and ensure that we're going to be able to buy more and more of their harvest at this really premium rate that they would otherwise never see in the local industry. So for us right now, we're on that scaling journey, like a lot of startups are, where we are continuing to kind of get funding. And my next bit will actually be kind of starting to look for grants as well for our farmers in order to, on the education side that they really desperately want.
Okay, amazing. Now, your International Women's Day is all about embracing equity. How can we as women leaders embrace more community and less commodity in 2023? Why is it essential, and what are some of your top tips?
I think I'm very much a believer that every purchase you make is a vote that you cast for the world that you want. So this is not possible for everyone, especially I'm very much aware we are in a deep cost of living crisis and not everyone has that opportunity. But if you are in a position to make decisions with your wallet, I think finding those brands, and again, finding the brands that aren't just beautiful Instagram brands that constantly flash up and bombard our screens, but finding ones with depth and with a purpose behind them. There are so many incredible businesses. And
sometimes just changing that one product at a time if it feels overwhelming, and particularly in light of
absolutely
funding.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. Like it's not about suddenly. I remember whenever I tried to switch to clean beauty and I got rid of all of my products in the beauty cabinet, and then you get overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I need a new sunscreen. I need a new soap. You have to change everything at once. I think it's about finding, one or two items at the start. Like, okay, what am I consuming? And staples, household staples, like coffee, like olive oil, like perhaps your wine, if that's a staple for you, picking that one thing and committing to support them, getting them on a subscription. I know a lot of us probably have done this with the coffee subscription for a while, making sure that you are supporting them. I think that's really great. I also think that there is, and your network does this so well, but getting involved in networks of women that you can learn from and have that mentorship. I have regular one-to-one, I call them founder one-to-one. So just like you would have a one-to-one with somebody on your team, I do it with other people who aren't necessarily in even the food and drink industry, are of a similar sort of business or something I'm aspiring to. And I think reaching out to those people, but also just being helpful when people reach out to you. The older I get, the more I now have people coming to me that have, just yesterday, I had a small producer from Spain who I don't even know if she wants to sell to me or start her own brand, but she just wanted to have some conversations. A lot of people are trying to navigate Brexit, which has been a right nightmare for a lot of small producers. Yeah. And I'm happy, to have those conversations. So definitely being generous with your time, because it always comes back. That is one thing. The more you give, the more you get back when it comes to that space. And I constantly, as much as I advise people, I also am so thankful for the advice I'm given.
Yeah, and particularly those people that align with your values are so key. As you say, even if they're doing something different or similar, it's really powerful. And that's why a lot of my work is bringing women together to be able to do that. Now, what 3 things are you going to be embracing this year? Yes.
So, every day it feels like it's actually even just getting worse, even though the business is growing. This agility side of being quite agile as not just as a small business, I think we all have to be in our roles. I talk to friends that are even, much larger companies and corporates, but there is a lot of unease in the markets. There's a lot of changes happening for good and for bad, politically, socially, but certainly from an economic standpoint. So I think the agility to kind of ride these different trends and ride the waves that are happening. I mean, I spoke at the beginning about supply chain issues, that it feels like it's even worse now than during the pandemic. And I'm getting calls and emails every day, and I'm on WhatsApp groups with producers in the olive oil space, but others that are just losing their mind because of monopolies in the glass industry. That mean we're at a huge shortage with things from like labels that people can't get their hands on, simple like tape and labels. There's been cardboard box shortages. There's all sorts of things like this that are just popping up.
The real basic stuff, isn't it? And I keep coming across the word agility this year, actually. I think it's something, as you say, across so many sectors, that we all need to embrace more of. So thank you for sharing that one. And two more before we wrap up.
So the other one would be confidence. So I think I came into olive oil new. Like I said, my background was in marketing, sustainability. I had loads to learn about olive oil, but I've now just completely immersed myself in that. And so I think getting the confidence, all of us as women in general, kind of owning what we know and portraying that confidence is really important. So that's something that I will be focusing on, because I've now proven to myself through a couple of examples that I really do finally know my stuff when it comes to olive oil. And so while I really lacked any confidence speaking about it before, I'm definitely well in it now, and I need to own it. And then the final point, which kind of pulls us all together, is just community. So building out my farmer network, not just with the ones that I work with now, but future, growing that community online with our customers, but connecting them to the farmers. That community building is really going to be a huge focus, because it is going to help expand us into new farmers, but also really get people excited about olive oil.
Amazing. I love those three things, Sarah. It's been amazing to hear you all start sharing your three things. I know our audience are going to really resonate. Now, before we go, where can we find Citizens of Soil? We will put your website in the show notes so anybody can have a look, can purchase. What are some of the social media channels that you use?
Yeah, so Instagram is quite a big channel for us. So we are Citizens of Soil on Instagram. Likewise, we do LinkedIn. So from a business perspective, if you want to connect with me or see sometimes we're sharing our struggles and on LinkedIn. And if you are on TikTok, we have some fun reels where we play with doing things like spoonfuls of olive oil in the morning and different health hacks and recipe trends on that channel.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today, Sarah, and sharing more about Citizens of Soil.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to She Rebel Radio. We thank you for listening and thank our headline partners, NatWest, for sponsoring this series. If this episode has inspired you, please pass it on and share with at least one other incredible woman. And don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. You can find out more about me and my work at luluminns.com or on most social media platforms.